Greetings, programmers. Today I want to teach you a little bit about how to get input into your programs. Today I'm going to be working in Python, and I want to show this to you. I'm going to show you both how to do it in Python 2.7 as well as Python 3. So I'm going to look at two different forms. The first one we're going to look at is keyboard input. I'm going to show you the keyboard input in both versions of Python. And then the second one I'm going to show you is file input. The file input I'm going to show you in Python 3, but the technique should work equally well in 2.7. And the main reason I'm going to do that is you'll notice I have the very wonderful code sculptor written by some software developers at Rice University, and it does execute Python 2.7 code. Not very useful for doing file reading, so I am going to use this to show the keyboard input. So without further ado, let's go ahead and look at what this looks like. So let's say, for example, I want to get some information into a variable. So let's say I want someone's name, and before you get user input, you might want to look at just storing that variable, and then maybe we want to show a greeting to this person. All right, so I might say something like hello, and then use string concatenation to say hello to our person. So here you see I run the code and it takes that name and stores it in there. Now, what if I want the keyboard input? Well, in Python 2.7, we use a function called raw underscore input. And the raw input takes the parameter of the prompt to give the user. Now you can leave this blank, and it'll just open, it'll wait for keyboard input from the user, and then it'll accept the information once you hit the carriage return. So, but I want to go ahead and give a prompt and then say, what is your name? Okay. And when we run this, you'll see I get a prompt that asks for my name, and put a name in here. And we'll see the output here says hello, and the name of input is Chris. So that's how we do it in 2.7. I'm going to leave this here just for a moment, and I do want to mention something. This raw input takes information as a string. It's going to be important knowledge here in a moment. If you're using Python 3.0, I'm going to switch over to my Wing IDE. Wing is a wonderful Python editor. You'll see that I'm running Python 3.6.5 right now. So in here, I'm going to do the same thing. So I want to store a name, and let's go ahead and do it. The function is just input, and for my prompt, what is your name? Okay. And the same thing, I want to print hello, and then also string concatenation with the name. All right. And now when I run this, see it asks what is your name. So let's say my name is Mark today, and you'll see hello Mark. So 3.0 just uses input, 2.7 raw input. But we don't always want strings. In fact, most often we will ask the user for numeric input. So let's look and see what that looks like. So I want numeric input on this one. And let's say I want to know the area of a circle. So maybe I'll have a cryptic, what is the radius? All right, now in order to do this, I do need the math library for pi. And I want to store this as a radius. And I'm going to deliberately make a mistake with this because I want you to see what happens. So the area of a circle is pi r squared. So that's math.pi times the radius to the second power. Okay, so I want you to see a little bit about how this works. So let's go ahead and run this. It's going to ask me for a radius, And let's do one that I could do off the top of my head. So we'll do a radius of 10. That should give us an area of 314. So here we see that we have an unsupported type, so it's a string. And as I said, I did this deliberately. So remember when I said the input gives you a string? We need to convert that string into a number. And there are a few ways to do this. One way to do this is to use the function eval. Eval will automatically convert the type into the most viable type. So in this case, I'm entering an integer, so it will store it as an integer number. And we don't have eval in CodeSculptor, so that's useful to know. We can actually force it into the types, so I can say turn this into an int. So when I type in my 10, it's still good, except now we have a problem with the print statement. And the print statement, it says I have a floating point value, because do be aware, pi is a floating point value, 3.14, and so forth. And that doesn't treat it as a string. So just like we have to convert the string that we read in into an integer, we're going to have to convert our final value back into a string so that we can print it correctly. So here we go. So again, radius of 10, and now I get the expected 314. So a few things to remember here. The function to get keyboard input is raw input. And if you want a numeric value, we're going to have to convert it. You can either use int. We can also convert it directly into a floating point value. We will be using floating at the end of this. And then if you have a number that you want to print, do remember that you have to convert the number to a string if you're concatenating it to another string. So let's look at what this would look like in our Python 3. So actually, I can actually just copy and paste this. So let's do that. I'll copy this, paste it over here. And just to remind you, in Python 3, we don't have raw input. It is simply just input. Okay, so now when I go to run this, okay, so it's asking me for radius. Again, I'm going to put in a 10 for my radius, and you'll see that I get the correct output. Okay, so that's how we do keyboard input. The next thing we want to look at is file input. For the file input, again, we're not going to be able to use CodeSculptor, but I'm going to do it in Wing, and I'll be back in a second. And through the magic of editing, I'm back. I had to go get myself a tasty beverage. Today I'm drinking sparkling ice, ginger lime. Quite good. So, file reading. So when we read from files, most programming languages require you to load lots of libraries. Interestingly, Python already has it built in for you. Awesome! So we're going to look at reading in a data file, and let's keep on this geometry-related track, and let's do some triangles. So I want to do area of a triangle. So the first thing I want to do is create a file to read from. So I'm going to go ahead and create a file in here. Just a new text file, and we'll call this triangle.txt. Let's go ahead and open that up, and inside my triangle.txt I want a base and a height. So let's say the base of my triangle is 25 units and the height is let's do 4.5 just to demonstrate that we can read floating point values. I'm going to save this document. Okay, I will leave it open though so that we can come back to it. And what I want to do is go ahead and read that information. So the first thing I'm going to do is prove that I can read the information. In order to do this, the first thing we need to do is open that file. So let's call that file input file. Okay, and to open it you use the function open. And here you see all the parameters. I'm using a professional version of Wing, by the way. I highly recommend it. It does give you a lot of suggestions on what you need to do to start your code. Unfortunately, this is a lot of stuff. We don't need most of those. So the first thing I want to do is put in the name of the file. So our file was called triangle.txt. So put that in there, triangle.txt. And then the next parameter you have is what are the permissions that you want on the file. Now for this one, I just want to read from the file. In a future video, I'll show you how to write to a file as well. Now those are actually the only two values we need. And just for my sanity, let's go ahead and I will want to close this file as well. So I'm going to say, excuse me, input file.close. And because you don't want to leave memory just hanging out there. So I want to read these two elements. To read, we just use the command read. Although I'm going to use read line. No, I'm going to use read. So the first thing I wanted was my base. So that's going to be input file.read. And my height will be a second read into the file. And let's go ahead and print those out. And again, I need to use the string converter when I'm working with numbers. Although those aren't numbers yet. Let's talk about that in a second. Okay, so here we see the base and the height. All right, cool. So ultimately now we want those stored as numbers. So let's go ahead and read those in as floats. Okay. And check to make sure that they're still getting read in correctly. Uh-oh. Okay, let's try that again. So I'm going to use read line instead. Read line reads all the way to the end of the line, and here I see that we have that read in. And these are both converted into floats. Let me go ahead and convert my height as a read line as well. And there we go. All right. So last thing we want to do is actually do our calculation. So my area would be 0.5 times the base times the height. When I'm doing these, I prefer to put the decimal value instead of doing 1 divided by 2 because you might forget that that gives you an integer division and may not give you the fractional value. So 1 divided by 2, of course, is 0. And just for anecdotal proof of that, let's go ahead and do print. Here, give it to me. One divided by 2. 1 divided by 2 is 0 because 2 goes into 1 0 times, and C. So that's kind of what we want to avoid there. So we have that, and as area, and of course this needs to be converted to a string. And let's go ahead and save and check that. And there you go. That's how you do file input.